Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Schwartz. I'm the Executive Director of the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, and I am just thrilled to have our first series of keynote speakers from the conference to do these brief webinars. I'm speaking with Gangaji, who is a leader in spiritual traditions. Hi, Gangaji. I wanted to say hello.
Hi, Bob. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So one of the things I thought your title of your talk is Our Responsibility to Peace. And I want to read something here that you said. Thought it'd be a good starting point so people might get a sense of what you're talking about. You say here, I can sense an urgency in the world to fix the horrors, to do something to help. But these noble efforts are ultimately useless unless each of us is willing to stop adding to the suffering by ending the war within ourselves. Wow. Perhaps you might say a few words about that.
Well, it's really, it's a permission to stop whatever you are trying to do and just recognize where that's coming from. I can usually only speak from my own direct experience, and that when I identified myself as a political activist, it was really coming from my own sense of lack of self-worth. So I was coming from this needy space and trying to help. And I wouldn't say I didn't do some good, but it was so limited. It was only when I was willing to turn back and face this neediness within myself that then whatever work I might do, social activism, helping the world in whatever way we frame that, was really coming as an expression of fulfillment, expression of peace, of my own discoveries. So it wasn't that I needed then even a particular outcome. I may desire a particular outcome, but I didn't need that for me, for my wholeness, for my health, physical health, psychological health, spiritual health. And so that's really what the gist of that is to recognize that in this moment, you can find your own fulfillment in this moment. I'm not speaking of a long process, that the fulfillment's already here. And from that, then, yes, let us speak of offering that fulfillment to everyone.
So, I guess I can imagine people thinking, well, but wait a minute, Gangaji. Look at all the stuff in the world. I just can't sit and meditate on my pillow all day. I mean, there are people, dying in Syria and starving in Africa, and there's stuff in our own country. What do you mean?
Well, that's so legitimate. Of course, I don't mean you sit and meditate on your pillow all day. And that's why I mentioned this is not a process-oriented invitation. It's immediate in this very moment. As you're listening to this, as you're watching this, you have the space within your own mind to just stop and discover, are you trying to get something? Are you fighting something? Are you hiding from something? Just to discover that, however it's showing itself within your own mind. And in that, to stop fighting, to stop trying to get something, to stop hiding just for a moment. And then there's the real capacity, the real possibility to discover the truth of yourself. And in that, you aren't separate from who you're trying to help. That's
Have
where
you been looking around my office, like watching me? Because
yes.
Yes, you have. Right. Oh no. That when I'm listening to you speak, it seems like, for me at least, it's sort of an ongoing. It's not an all or nothing thing. Getting into, I got to get this done, and there's a deadline, and the push, and getting into that space, which stresses me out, and then finding a way to let go of that and go, okay, it's going to unfold, just be in the process. And so I kind of go in and go out of it.
Yeah. I think I'm not speaking of some kind of possibility of never having stress again. You know, stress in its right proportions is very useful to our form, to our systems. But it's recognizing when we are so deeply stressed because we don't recognize our own fullness, our own wholeness, that however much we try to help, we're helping, and yet we're bringing our suffering to that helping. We're bringing our stress to our daily task. And so, at least to know that we have the possibility and the capacity and the permission to just stop for a moment, to not get it done, to not know what should happen,
Hmm.
and be here.
I think that might be something for, I know there are, people that do energy psychology and other therapists in general who often are trying to help
Mm-hmm.
and help, so people, that are doing energy work, they're tapping on stuff. And sometimes I tell people, if you're doing this from the space of trying to kill the problem,
Mm-hmm.
um, doesn't work as well.
That's it. It's really then we're speaking about what's more functional. We don't even have to take it personally. It's if we want to help, how can we help best? And we
Hmm.
can help best by being empty, open, free of our own suffering, at least in a moment. I don't want to paint some idealistic picture of you should be always in a space of never suffering. Not that at all. Just so that you recognize that you know the way home.
Ah,
And that then you are offering home.
so the theme of the conference is changing the world through personal healing and transformation. Now, I know what that means to me. I'm curious what that, how that, what that phrase would mean to you, and what you may be sharing with the audience as we go through it in Santa Clara.
Well, I think one of the major problems with division of the world into spiritual or psychological or even energetic is that we separate ourselves, our political. When I was referring earlier to my political activist days, I felt very separate from those people who weren't doing political activism, and
Mm.
certainly very separate from those people who I thought were wrong politically.
You mean they're not?
Well, they may be, but we are too.
Uh,
That there's then a humility that can come into that as we recognize that the suffering that we're seeing, and I'm not ever suggesting that you don't see that and that you don't feel empathy for that and feel the call to help that in some way, but that suffering is not separate from your own suffering. That in fact you aren't separate from the world. We may live in very privileged, we certainly live in very privileged situations, aspects of this world. But if we look at the whole, we are all just aspects of the whole. So, as privileged aspects, and by privileged, I mean just the fact that we can have this conversation in this moment, that we're free to have that. We have the time, we aren't starving, we have the technology. So we can then use that privilege to welcome the world
mhm.
rather than to cocoon ourselves further from it.
So between now and the conference, anybody watching this, I wonder if you could offer a practice,
Mm,
a doing, if you will, or a being,
mm,
but a
mm,
practice that people could do, in their daily life, or kind of to prepare themselves. Uh,
mhm.
what might you
Well,
say?
I- my teacher's gift to me. My teacher was H.W. Punja, and his teacher was Ramana Maharshi. And the practice, the perspective, the outlook, is really one of self-inquiry. And that to me means telling the truth, the inner truth. And so for me, the biggest question is what do I want? in this moment when I'm trying to help somebody or when I'm trying to help myself, what do I want? It's a two-part question. And when you're really clear what you want in this moment, where am I looking for that? And are you willing to, in just for a moment, stop looking? So it's a three-part question, or it's a three-part practice. Two questions: what do I want? And where am I looking for that? And then the third part, which is really what we could call the practice, is am I willing just in this moment to stop looking, to stay conscious and to stop looking? It's very profound in the possibility because the tragic irony of most of our lives is that we are looking for what's already here. The
It's
fullness is here.
right. So when you stop looking and realize it's already, you have the opportunity to have it right here, right now.
It is here.
Right.
It really
You
is.
just don't realize it yet.
Yes, that's what self-realization points to.
Well, I think that, might be a pretty reasonable place to stop. You got me kind of in a centered place. Um, so, I well, let me ask you one other thing, and because you raised this, and I mentioned to you before we are on the camera that ASAP is engaging in this new fundraising. Uh, it's interesting. We have this title called "Changing the World Through Personal Healing and Transformation," and so part of, again, for me at least, that the transformation was realizing we could do more, and so
Mhm.
in the process of we've started to basically embody this. There's a whole unfolding, but we've started by the time people hear this, a virtual campaign to raise $45,000 to bring energy psychology to training to psychiatrists and mental health workers who work with Syrian refugees, training to U.S. This peer-to-peer work with U.S. vets, and then work with people in genocide survivors in Africa. So there is this like, wow, that we can do something. And I'm curious how you feel about. I mean, that's the outside doing. There's been a ton of work, and yet there's this. It really kind of feels kind of like so cool though. Like I don't mind doing the work, even though we're like really working hard. Like you got to get the website together and do all this. But
Yeah.
I'm curious your sense of this inner sense and working to change the world outside. And people do want to be able to do something. I do want to be able to help with this, but what do I do? I'm in my living room or whatever. How can I make a difference?
As you are doing, you are called or inspired by this possibility of reaching out in ways that are needed and being asked for. So I salute this totally. I am very moved by it. You use the word peer counseling. I remember a very early phase of my spiritual search. I participated in some peer counseling, and it was tremendous for me. I felt seen. I felt heard. I could be myself.
Right.
And this is how we can support one another.
The
And
nice thing is, right. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean.
I was just going to say, and in supporting one another, we receive, as you're
Right.
just reporting.
And that's the thing that's interesting is the part of the model for a lot of these three programs is I teach if I get the somebody gets some help by learning some of these approaches, but then they can pay it forward. They teach somebody else within the community. It's not the health professional, it's not the doctor necessarily, but it's the soldier who works with the other soldier together, as opposed to because the mental health professional.
Well, that's it. That's the fire that lights the fire that lights the fire. And that's where there's real possibility of our lives making a difference to life. Yes, I salute
Mm.
you.
Well, thank you. Well, I am just looking forward to meeting you live and in person. This has
Mm.
been a good introduction, and I know a lot of folks here at ASEP are thrilled that you're going to be coming to join us. And I hope everybody they will come join us. They can always find this conference, all the information you want on energypsychologyconference.com. And if you want to find out about Gangaji, it's gangaji.org.
Or, yeah,
Org.
org.
Yeah. So thank you very much. It's been a
Mm,
pleasure.
I really look forward to it.
Thanks.